How we doing this morning? It is great to be here at CAFO. I am excited about the opportunity to record a live Family Life Today radio program here at CAFO. We've been doing this now for almost a decade, I think, recording programs. How many of you have been in on one of those sessions before? Okay, many of you have. Good. All right. Well, we're going to do it again today. By the way, Dennis Rainey wanted me to greet you all. Dennis and Barbara are sad they couldn't be here, getting a little time off together. And some of you know we've recently made a transition in the hosts of Family Life Today, and now Dave and Ann Wilson are sitting in that spot. But this ministry and the work that you all are doing is dear to our hearts, and so it's good to be able to be here and to have an interview that we're going to do together. So. We'll kick it off. Here's how it'll work. I'm going to let our audience know, our radio audience know that we have a live studio audience. So when I point to you, I need you to let them know as well. So I'll say something about we're recording in front of a live studio audience, and when I say that, you need to cheer wildly, okay? And then I'll introduce our guests for the program. So here we go. It is not often that we record a Family Life Today radio program with a live studio audience, but we've got one here today. We are recording this program at the 2019 Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit that's being held in Louisville, Kentucky. And we have the opportunity today to talk to a husband and wife who are champions for the orphan here in the state of Kentucky. So would you all join me in welcoming the Governor and First Lady of Kentucky, Matt and Glenna Bevin. Join us. Good to have you guys here. Good to have you here. Thank you. Yes. Have a seat. So welcome to both of you. Great to have you here. And I want to get this right off the start. I understand adoption and orphans was something both of you cared about when you started dating. And I just want to know from you, was he faking it to get the girl? I mean, because, usually it's like, oh, yeah, you're interested in adoption? Yeah, me too. Yeah, right? And he's just lying because he wants to get...
It was him first. We were sitting in his driveway, and I'll never forget it because I kind of knew then. Yeah. We were talking, and it was basically one of those conversations. I was a nurse, he was in the military, and we were like, if you could do anything in the world, or, when you grow up, what do you want to be?
Right.
He said, I want to own an orphanage. And I'm like, yes.
I want to own an orphanage?
I did.
Yes.
And it's an odd thing, but when I was a kid, the first time I ever remember anyone asking me what I wanted to do when I grew up, that was my response. I always had a heart for orphans. I would read stories about orphaned kids, and my heart would just break. I mean, books that no one's heard of, like a book called Clematis, nobody's heard of, but then books that everybody's heard of, like the Boxcar Children, and just kids that just were just wanting a home and trying to make their way, and it always just moved me as a kid.
Any idea where that came from?
It just came, I think it was formed by many things, not the least of which was I learned also of an orphanage in India when I was a boy, and I will say time does not probably allow us to talk to the full extent of what has just been unfolding backstage here, but God is an awesome God.
Tell everybody who you just met.
When I was 7 years old, I learned about an orphanage in India. How I learned about it was as a result of a woman who had grown up there herself, traveled around to small little churches throughout New England. I was raised in a tiny little village in northern New Hampshire. She didn't come to our church, but she happened to go to some other church. My mother happened to go and hear her speak. Her name was Kamalbai. She was somebody who spoke and she sang. My mother must have made some small donation or put her name on a list or something. And then we began to subsequently get a little newsletter called Buds and Blossoms. And in this little newsletter, once a month, it would detail stories of these children in their background to the extent that it was known, in what, through the love of Christ and the hands and feet of Christ being administered at this little place, the Ramabai Mukti Mission, how lives were being changed and little buds were blossoming and lives were being changed. And just a moment ago, just incredible, we met a young woman by the name of Anu, who's not such a young woman, but she's still younger than us, so, who grew up there, was an orphan there, and whose life was transformed. She was brought there as a 10-month-old, and her story is so remarkable. But it's incredible how God works and how things come back together. I just don't believe in coincidence.
You've been to that orphanage many times yourself.
Many times.
Yeah.
It was when I was a boy, I said, someday I'm going to go there. And God has blessed us, and I've been able to, in turn, do a lot of things there in terms of projects. Many years ago, almost 20 years ago now, building the first ever computer academy in that whole area of the country, and doing it there at this orphanage, and how that transformed lives and made a ripple effect of things, and then developing land down by the railroad tracks and helping with their agricultural program. Just, it's amazing. But then to meet this woman whose life is now so intertwined with so many of the ministries of the people in this room, it's just incredible how it comes together.
So just to clarify, when a guy says, I want to own an orphanage, that's a romantic thing? Girls fall for that?
For this girl, it was,
Worked on this one.
yeah.
And part of the reason that was something that you were drawn to, you vocationally were a nurse,
Yes.
and you saw firsthand, in fact, you shared a story about the time when you were nursing in Louisiana, a situation that happened there with foster care and adoption that had a tragic end.
Exactly. Where I grew up, we didn't really see, because our community pretty much came around each other, we didn't really grasp the whole gravity of orphans and foster care and things like that when we were kids. But when I was a nurse, sometimes we would do private adoptions out of the labor and delivery unit where I worked. We had a nurse and a doctor who were set to adopt a child, a newborn baby, and at the very last minute, the mother, who was a cocaine addict, it was her 8th child, the other 7 were in the system, she changed her mind. That's when I knew that something was terribly wrong with our system. And then our story, personally, we, like I said, we'd always wanted to adopt, but we were in Cherokee Park one afternoon playing. My girls took up with a little girl about their age. They were around 11-ish. And at the end of the afternoon, I said, would you ever want to come for a play date? There was a woman sitting over on the picnic table watching her play. I said, I could ask your mom. She said, no, that's not my mom. I don't have parents. I live in the orphanage, and we're not allowed to have play dates. So, of course, we went home and called the orphanage, and we wanted that little girl. We went through the whole process. It was a little over a year and a half.
You say you wanted her, not just for a play date.
No, to adopt her.
Oh, we wanted that little girl.
We went.
She didn't have parents.
What's it like to have a wife who goes to the park one day and comes home?
I was there with her.
Oh, you were
Yeah.
there.
This was,
Oh, yeah.
it was a joint effort. We were tag teaming,
Yeah.
actually.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So
But
you,
here's the thing. I mean, this was a little girl, 11 years old. She had, as we subsequently found out, had 14 different placements.
She aged out without a family.
Nobody was trying to adopt her. She wanted a family desperately. And to make a very long story short, after well over a year of complications and fingerprintings and multiple fingerprintings and financial exams and home inspections and interviews with our children and interviews with us in joint parenting classes that we had to take together during set hours that they were determined by, some of which we were being taught as parents of 5 how to be parents by people who didn't even have children. And it was just, I wish I were making
we're
any
not
of this
kidding.
up. It was, the whole thing was so absurd, but we went through it all because the desire to adopt this little girl was great, and we wanted her to be a part of our family. And at the end of it all, we were told, this was here in Kentucky more than 10 years ago now, we were told that, you know what, you already have 5 children, and it will be better for her to stay in the system than to be the 6th child in a family, because she won't get enough attention. And can you imagine? And I just remember then, I had never been anywhere near the political process. I had never run for anything. I'd never worked on a campaign. I had never taken a political science course. But I was just outraged that government that would have control of this young girl's life with the responsibility of doing what is in her best interest would make such a seemingly arbitrary and just wrong-headed decision. And I remember at the time thinking somebody should do something about this. And now here we are. It's just crazy how, so, crazy. Incidentally, I will say that in Kentucky, if you have 5 children, you can now adopt a 6th child. So that is possible.
Well, and you were not able to adopt that young woman, but you did ultimately go outside of Kentucky. In fact, you found international adoption was much less complicated than adoption inside your own state.
Right.
To a degree, although, and I think this is a room full of people who understand this, there's nothing uncomplicated about the adoption process anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere. The fits and starts and the forms and the this and the that and many of the things with good intent, but ultimately just convoluted and bureaucratic and so difficult and so time-consuming and so costly.
And so worth it. I mean, it is very difficult. Some of the paperwork will make you want to pull your caseworker's hair out, but it is so worth it. We went there to pick up our son, and we met a sibling group of 3. So I like to say,
You went there. You went where?
to Ethiopia.
Ethiopia.
God called us to Ethiopia.
Okay.
So 1 became 4,
Wait, you got 5 bio kids at home.
and 5 became 9, and so we're
Because here's
now
the
the Bevin
thing.
11.
We adopted 1, which was the intent. And when you have, so then we were a family of 6, and then the sibling group. And again, we're preaching to the choir here. 6, 9, really? I mean, what's the difference at that point? I mean, really? The
You just
only
drive-
thing that changes is what you drive.
And
You get your own personal church van at that point, but it's all good.
Just the level of complexity from 5 to 9 for a mom. You were telling me you have a PhD in laundry, right?
Oh, yeah.
How has your life changed since you went from 5 to 9?
How has it changed? I have more blessings and more help, so my girls spoil me rotten, and my boys keep me running. I mean, I don't know. How's it changed? We drive a really ugly car. That's my only complaint.
We were never that cool anyway.
I was cool. You were not cool. I
Who are we
was
kidding?
cool.
Who are we kidding? Come on.
You
Drive
shared
it with pride.
you shared that the bureaucracy in the state was one of the things that motivated you to start looking at public service. Since you've been elected, this has been one of the areas that your administration has focused on in the state of Kentucky. How can we make this simpler? How can we do what's right for kids, right for families, but right for kids? We would have thought, maybe as early as 2 decades ago, that would be something everyone would rally around and be on the same page with. It's not as simple. The world is, there are forces aligned against adoption and foster care in our day.
There are, not only in general, but even for people of faith. There's just a whole lot of hoops to jump through. And unfortunately, and folks here understand this, it's so inextricably woven together with government, mother may I this, mother may I that, a lot of rules, a lot of hoops, a lot of you can't do that because otherwise it might compromise your funding from this source. And it's become just too bureaucratic. And so what we're trying to do, and I would love to tell you we've solved it all in Kentucky, we haven't. But we're working on it, and we're determined to come up with as good as such a thing could exist, a gold standard that could be plugged and played in other states, that could be replicated. It will never be perfect. It's comprised of lots of imperfect moving parts. But if we can find homes for the 470 some odd thousand children that are in foster care in America, and so many of them eligible for adoption, About 25% of the 10,000 in this state are eligible for adoption. And we have 6,500 houses of worship in Kentucky, 2,500 children just looking for a forever family. I mean, if the body of Christ cannot step up and find one home for every 2.5 churches,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we're doing
What
every
our
week.
hope is, that's right. I don't think there are many states where the governor has do you call him a czar, a foster care adoption czar?
No, we have a fellow and his wife, Chris and Alicia Johnson, who were brought in. Yeah, maybe, known apparently to some in this room. It might be them cheering. I don't know. But this is a couple who is amazing. This is a passion of theirs as well. They were living in Florida. We learned of them. Long story short, touch base with them. They have fostered over 40 children. They have adopted 7 of their 10 children as a result of that process. It seemed to us that they were kind of meant it, that they too were all in on this.
Right.
And when we met them, it wasn't initially seemingly obvious that it would work, but God blessed our conversation and the opportunities in ways that resulted in them being able to move here. So the two of them have really helped to shepherd this, really helping us to find ways to partner with people, primarily faith-based organizations, but not even necessarily faith-based organizations, to take every resource in America and bring them all together and to channel those in ways that are not being done anywhere else in the country. And I'm excited to see the kind of things that are starting to happen.
One of the challenges that we face is that when we approach this from a faith-based perspective and try to work things out in public policy, there can be some resistance to that. You bring in a pastor to give leadership to this. I'm sure there are some whose eyebrows were raised that it was a pastor coming in to do this.
It's not the first thing I've done that's raised eyebrows, so it's all good.
How can we work well together? Because we want to be good citizens as followers of Christ, and yet we've got some views about marriage and family and what that's supposed to look like in a culture. How are you navigating those waters?
I would say this, both to you in response to this question, but also to everyone in here. We have no reason to apologize for what we believe. We really don't. Not everybody believes what we believe. Not everybody shares our faith or our worldview on any number of things. But any more than we don't expect them to apologize for their opinions, we do not need to apologize for ours. And we do not need to fail to hold firm to those things that we know to be true. And whether others know it to be true or even believe that we are correct doesn't mean we need to back off. And so this idea that the separation of church and state, there's truth to that to a degree, but not nearly to the degree that so many would have us believe. And so for me, I'm very unapologetic about it. I don't wear it on my sleeve, but I encourage all of you to be bold in this, to stand firm. And it's interesting, how you ultimately get it to work together is because the results speak for themselves. You look at the people who are adopting, look at the people who are fostering. There's less than 40% of American families go to church regularly every week, and yet you look at the people who are fostering in America, over 65% of the families that are fostering children in this country go to church every single week. Why is that? Because people of faith are people with a heart for this very thing that we're talking about. Right. And I'll tell you what, the results speak for themselves.
Yeah. Tell folks about the First Lady's Youth, what is it, Fly what?
We call it the Fly LC.
Fly LC.
It's the First Lady's
Sounds kind of
Youth
hip,
Leadership.
doesn't it? Fly LC.
You're so fly, yeah.
Exactly, right?
We're dating ourselves by thinking that's cool. There's kids here thinking, oh, that was like in the 80s.
That's right.
Yeah.
So tell everybody what you do.
So basically what we have is a leadership council comprised of foster care kiddos who we meet several times a year. We look at policy, what they would like to see changed, and then we prep them and they go before the legislature. Our kids were not allowed even to get a driver's license if they were...
A foster kid couldn't get a driver's license?
No. if they were in care, they were not allowed to get a driver's license. So we changed that. They've done a lot of wonderful things like that. And we have a very friendly legislature. Our legislature right now loves our children. So they step up in ways that is really beautiful for these kids. And it gives our kids a platform. They can stand before the legislature, they testify, they get to have a voice, and now they're an advocate for other kids.
This is 18,
We have 18 right now. It
and they're
fluctuates a
between
little.
14 and 19 years old. And these are sharp young people still in the system, still in being fostered, right?
Yes. When they come to us, being in foster care isn't easy, and these kids have endured some amazingly horrible things. But one of my little girls, she came and she was very goth, and her hair was down, and she never spoke. And if you met her now, she is poised, and she is articulate, and she is a hardcore advocate. So, we're just giving kids a voice, giving them a platform, putting them in front of a speaking coach, and just encouraging them and giving them opportunities, and they're the ones that take it and run with it.
That's amazing. So if you could go back and talk to yourselves from 10 years ago when you were facing the bureaucratic challenges, because some of these people here are in that place where they're frustrated with the systems in their own states. They've been trying to advocate for foster care or for adoption, and they're hitting roadblocks. And some of them may be thinking, well, maybe I need to run for governor in my state. But if that's not what God's calling them to, the First Lady is going, you all run for governor, okay? How would you coach them on how to deal with the bureaucracy in a way that brings about change?
Boy, there's a couple.
On your knees.
Yeah,
You need the full armor of God if you're going to step into politics.
Yeah, this is true. I would think, be graceful at every turn, be gracious. People in government are overwhelmed. They've become jaded. They've become cynical. People who came in with all the right intention and good hearts find themselves frustrated and overwhelmed and broken down by the process almost as much as we are on the other side of the equation. And a little bit of a smile and a little bit of graciousness goes an amazingly long way. I would say that costs nothing, is easily done, and is the first thing I would say. Additionally, find a legislator, find somebody who will own this in your respective states, because the one thing I've found, we spoke recently at the National Governors Association, and this was a topic that we had asked to be put on there, and there are other states where there are Democrats and Republicans that are in charge, where people have a passion and a heart for this, and they are making strides as best they can. And here's what I know, people want to find solutions for this. They do. They want to find solutions for this. And so if we can come up with solutions here in Kentucky that can be replicated, if you don't have to reinvent the wheel has the ability to roll in any number of other places. And this is why we're passionate about making it work here. And I'm grateful to all of our partners that I alluded to earlier that are coming together to help us with this, because you're going to start to see marked change. And the Johnsons and others are shepherding this. That our Cabinet Secretary for Health and Family Services, Adam Meyer, has such a passion. His Deputy Secretary, Christy Putnam, such a passion, a genuine, heartfelt passion to see this work. And this is something that is going to make a transformative change in America. I know it. I know it as surely as we sit here, that change is coming to this topic. I've had conversations with the president, with advisors of his. I'm working to try to get this elevated to become a national level focus of attention. And if nothing else, whether you like him or dislike him, I will say this: if the President of America gets focused on something, you will hear about it. So, you will hear about it.
Yes. I'm just checking Twitter to see if he's tweeted anything recently.
Here's the thing, I'm telling you, the results are powerful.
Yeah.
And you look at what's happened with criminal justice reform and things of this sort that nobody ever would have thought. It's easy for us as people, who are of faith, and people who are Christians, I would guess, in large measure in this room. The fact that we often remember the widows and orphans because that's a little more easy to get our arms around, but then the people in prison were as equally advocated to be mindful of. And they have long been forgotten. And so as we start to see change on that front in America, how much easier will it be for us to engage people, their hearts, their minds, their souls, as it relates to widows and orphans in this case?
I know as we're talking about this here, your passion is coming through. I'm sure if we were in other forums, other passions would be emerging because you're not a single issue guy. But I do have the sense that if we could look ahead 25 years and we could say, what was the Bevin administration known for? If somebody said foster care and adoption in Kentucky was changed and it spread throughout the country, you'd be okay with that being your legacy?
Oh, absolutely. And there are many things, but I'd be delighted by that because, again, that has profound generational family tree related effect for generations to come. I mean, this would be my hope that people would say that. I will say this simply, though, on many fronts, and this should be the same for anybody in public office, and I do hope that there are people in this room that will consider stepping up, because of and by and for the people only works if the people get engaged, and I mean really engaged. It's going to happen one way or the other, and it's going to happen to us or as a result of our efforts. But I would say that as I look at where we are in Kentucky, we're sort of, for those of you who've grown up in a rural environment, this is like being in the barn in the springtime. Things pile up over the winter. And we are in the shoveling years right now in Kentucky. And it's all good. Somebody wants to ride the pony, but first you got to clean out the barn. And so I do believe there is a pony under this pile, which is why we're still shoveling with smiles on our faces. But we are going to clean out the barn. We're going to show how it can be done. We're going to hope and encourage and inspire other states to replicate this on this front and others. We're going to clean out the barn, and we're going to show people what good government that really is of and by and for the people, all the people, really looks like.
That's great. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You mentioned starting on your knees. Would you mind closing what we're doing here with just a word of prayer for the kids and for this issue, not just here in Kentucky, but all across the country? Would you do that?
Yes, of course. Dear Jesus, I am so humbled. I am just so overwhelmed by your goodness to us. Thank you for this room for people. I know that they're going to go out and they're going to take everything that they've learned and they've experienced here, and they're going to spread it throughout. I thank you for the hearts that are here that even though this is a huge, daunting task, they're willing to take that step forward. I ask that you bless each and every one of them and everyone that they come in contact with for your glory. And we ask all these things in Jesus' precious name.
Would you all join me in thanking the governor and the First Lady of Kentucky? Thank you, guys.